At this Business Today India at 100 Summit, we've heard from different government ministers, economists, corporates about how India is on the move. The Prime Minister is talking about India becoming the world's third largest economy by 2027 and becoming a developed country by 2047. Are things indeed as rosy as they seem? What does the forthcoming G20 summit mean for India? In this special interview to Business Today magazine, the Prime Minister talks about G20 becoming a catalyst for a new global order. It's time now for an alternate point of view. I am delighted to welcome to the India at 100 Summit one of the sharpest financial minds in the country, a man who's run the country's treasury and understands how this system works and what doesn't. Can you join me in raising a warm round of applause as we welcome Mr. P Chidambaram, former Finance and Home Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram, for joining us here. I want to start by asking you about the Prime Minister's big promise. Modi ki guarantee hai by 2027, India becoming the third largest economy. That within the next term, he says, of his government, India will be the third largest economy. He says your government left India at number 10, and within 15 years of being in power, he would have taken India to number 3, signaling a once-in-a-lifetime generational shift in global power equations, which the government claims they have made happen, which you couldn't. Let's start from there, Mr. Chidambaram. Welcome.
Let's ask a simple question. What was the size of the GDP in 91-92? 25.4 lakh crore. In 10 years, we doubled it, and we left in, we assumed 2003-04, it was 50.8 lakh crore. Again in 10 years, we doubled it, it was 100 lakh crore. I asked this question of the Finance Minister, she did not answer. Maybe you will answer. Will you double 100 lakh crore to 200 lakh crore by 2024? Anyone wants to take a guess? The answer is no. I'm happy that we are becoming the third largest economy. And in course of time, China will become the first largest economy. And India will catch up with the United States for the number 2 position in about 25, 30 years. But does that make us a rich country? India becoming the third largest economy is irrelevant. And I use that word advisedly, irrelevant to 16% of the population, which translates to nearly 23 crore people who, according to the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, are poor. And this poor bar is only 1,286 rupees per month in urban India and 1,089 rupees per month in rural India. Even this low bar cannot be crossed by 23% of the people. So I'll be proud, I'm happy, but I'll be proud when India becomes the third largest economy in per capita terms, not in the size of the GDP.
There's a big debate about whether this growth that we're seeing and all the tailwinds at this moment which seem to be supporting India are partly on account of a stable political formation in this country. Some in the Congress seem to claim that there is an inevitability to growth. And I want to draw you in on this because ministers whom we've heard from in the government say there is nothing inevitable about growth. Countries like Argentina have gone from positions of economic strength to stress within a decade. They're saying it's because the government is marching with purpose, therefore India is growing. there is no inevitability about growth. Given what happened with the pandemic, given the Russia-Ukraine war, interest rates, things could have gone south for India. If India has emerged stronger, they claim, on the back of the pandemic, it's because they have a leader like Prime Minister Modi. How do you respond to this, Mr. Chidambaram?
I don't deny there has been growth. Question is, are you satisfied with the growth rate? Are you satisfied with the growth rate? Between 2004 and 2009, the first 5 years of the UPA government, we grew at 8.5% in constant terms. If you take the entire 10 years, 2004 to 2014, we grew at 7.5%. Now, what is the 9-year growth average? 5.7%. It's a mirror image of 7.5.
Can it be argued that there was also a pandemic, which is once in a century black swan event, which obviously slows things down, which didn't happen on your watch?
Pandemic indeed was a black swan event. It slowed down, but it could have been handled better. It could have been handled differently, and we might not have suffered that plummeting negative growth. Please also remember, in 2004 to 14, there were 2 black swan events. One was the international financial crisis, and the other was the taper tantrum. Both pulled us down. We overcame the constraints. Pandemic was a major constraint. I don't deny that. But I think we could have handled it better.
So on the 21st of August, I had an opportunity to spend time with the Prime Minister and question exactly what you're saying about the handling of the economy during the pandemic. It's the Prime Minister's contention that it is the manner in which the government handled the pandemic, which is why India has emerged stronger. Contrary to this, because your government, your former finance minister at that time, was profligate during the economic crisis of the late 2000s, which is why India ended up having the kind of problems that it did later, which he claims he's fixing now. Whereas a country like China, because of how they handled the pandemic, has actually come out wobbling, whereas India has come out strong.
No, there's no point comparing India and China. China had a wrong policy of 0 COVID deaths. No other country followed that. So I don't think we compare yourself to China. Question is, the pandemic could certainly have been handled better in at least 3 or more matters. One, the vaccinations could have been ordered earlier. I've written columns on this. We can go back to the data. The vaccinations could have been ordered earlier. 2, the vaccine producers could have been paid money earlier. After orders, they were not paid money for 3 months. 3, all those migrants, internal migrants, 3 crore people is the estimate, were left to fend for themselves. They walked hundreds of kilometers. It certainly could have been handled better. Until the Supreme Court intervened, there were no trains to take them, no buses to take them. That could have been handled better. And number 4, the preparedness of hospitals, oxygen could have been done better. Imagine the number of bodies that were burnt in makeshift pyres on the banks of the Ganga. Have you forgotten that? Look back on the number of ambulances that were queued outside hospitals, number of mortuary vans that were queued outside cremation centers. I know of cases where the patient was allowed a bed only if he brought a cylinder with him. It's not as though India did not have the capacity to make oxygen. We've got huge capacity to make oxygen. But the government had not even forethought that a pandemic like this would require
But they did
oxygen.
better than a lot of other governments, sir.
Better how? The official figure is 5 lakh deaths, right? In India, there are over 6 lakh villages. Show me one village where there's not one death. Show me one village in this country, only talking about villages, not towns. India is about 32% urbanized. one village in India where there are no COVID deaths at all. If you take one death per village, that's 6 lakhs. What about urban India? The WHO numbers don't agree with your government's numbers. So let's not get into COVID management. Yes, they managed the propaganda and the media around it. So it appears that we did well. I'm not saying we did so badly, but certainly we could have done better. And certainly if, say, they are a broad-based consultation, we could have done better.
I want to engage with you on some of the pressing challenges of this moment. The India Today Mood of the Nation opinion poll, which came out this week, says unemployment and inflation are the two big challenges which are of concern to voters across the country. Let's start with unemployment and the issue of job creation. How do you view the government's approach on creating jobs? And if you were in government at this moment, what would you do? What do you think they're getting right and wrong?
Government's handling is terrible on job creation. If I were in government, well, the wishes were horses. I don't have the full data. It's only if you are in government, you have the full data and you have all the levers in your control. Given that constraint, I will still attempt an answer. Government's handling on job creation is terrible because this government's approach to economic policy making is all wrong. We are going back to pre-1991. This is like deja vu as far as I'm concerned. Our average customs tariff was brought down to 8% when I left the finance ministry. It's back to 13% and creeping up. Licensing is back in imports and exports. SEBI regulations, RBI regulations are as good or as bad as they were in the early 90s. The fear of investigating agencies are the new God. Omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient. They are all over the place. In such a situation, jobs will not be created. Which are the 3 job-creating sectors? The 3 job-creating sectors are mining, manufacturing, and construction. All 3 industries are today constrained by external limitations, controls, licenses, regulations, and above all, fear. Jobs will not be created with these policies. Jobs can be created only if we move to open up the economy, allow market forces to take place, and start with light regulation and tightened regulation only where it's absolutely necessary. Jobs will not be created with these economic policies.
A contra viewpoint to what you're saying can be that the trade tariffs that you're talking about are part of a global trend at this moment. America getting increasingly protectionist. So it's not as if India is the only country that's building trade barriers. And as a consequence of the pandemic and the kind of unreliability China displayed in maintaining supply chains, India is actually benefiting from the world wanting to look beyond China as part of a China plus one supply chain rearrangement, which the government can claim because it's been pushing Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India, and because of the size of the Indian domestic economy, we are actually going to be and are in the direction of becoming the prime beneficiaries as a result of some of these policies.
I've heard this for the last 36 months. And I am sure I'll hear it over the next 9 months also. It's not working. It's not working. What you say is not working. And don't compare India with America. Please understand one thing. America is the powerhouse of technology. They are not dependent on imported technology like we do. America is a capital exporting country. It's a different matter that all the other countries' reserves are invested in America. So America does not concern itself about fiscal deficit. I've never heard an American economist or a politician talk about the fiscal deficit of America. Therefore, let's not compare ourselves with America. We are dependent on investment, which is foreign investment. We are dependent on imported technology. We are dependent upon export markets. Export markets, I agree with you, because of their protectionism, are constrained. But what about the other two? If we pull down the shutters, we are the losers. America will not be a loser. We are the losers. We have to open up, not close down.
Locking horns with Mr. Chidambaram on economic matters is fraught with danger, but I will take the risk by asking you, why do you think it's not working when the likes of Foxconn, Apple, and so many other companies, whether it's in spaces like semiconductors, where India hasn't had any manufacturing capability, when the government, through its policies, creates conditions which make some of these tech majors say they will want to come and invest in India, the government can say it is working. And we've seen enough signaling of intent to suggest that the investment is in the pipeline, it will come. Mr. Chidambaram is seeing the glass half empty.
No, I don't. I'm seeing this amber light for the last 24 months. When is it turning green? Who is manufacturing mobile phones in this country? Please understand, the truth is we are assembling mobile phones. We're not manufacturing.
But that wasn't happening on your watch either. At least a place like Noida, some places.
My watch was 9 years ago. What are you talking about, my watch? Last 9 years. We were in government for 10 years. They have been in government for 9 years and 4 months. So let's not talk about what happened before. And then I can talk about Vajpayee's government. And Vajpayee's government can talk about Narasimha Rao's government. Narasimha Rao's government can talk about Devagowda's government. Let's talk about the 9 years is not a short period. 9 years is 2 terms. And in 2 terms, you should have shown that your policies are successful. I'm hearing about job creation. I'm talking about investment boom. I'm hearing about manufacturing boom. I'm hearing the same thing. It's the same broken record which is being played every other day.
Let's come to the second issue apart from unemployment, which is of price rise and the government's handling of the situation. Now, the likes of Minister P Chidambaram, Finance Minister Sitaraman, and several others in the government say inflation on the watch of the Modi government has been more under control than it was on yours. Now, partly on account of international factors, but also partly on account, they claim, of their government's policies. To some extent, recently with, say, tomatoes and onions and food grains, we've seen that change. But largely, the government can claim that their handling of the inflation situation has been better than the UPA government.
Wrong. Data shows it's wrong. Inflation was under control up to 2008-9. We inherited high inflation in 2003-4. We inherited high inflation. We brought it under control in 2005-6, and it remained under control up to 2008-9. In 2008-9, I take constructive responsibility. Underline constructive. Because in my defense, I was not the finance minister after 2008-9 until I returned in 2012. That 3-year period, there was high inflation. I'm not denying that. But there was high inflation because of the policy of the government. We don't want to go into it. I take constructive responsibility. But we brought down inflation in the last 1.5 years, and we delivered a last year growth rate of over 6%. Now, this government had a huge windfall. Prices of crude fell to below $35 a barrel. Average price during Dr. Manmohan Singh's government was $100 a barrel, $35 a barrel. They could have done wonders. On the contrary, greed took over. They taxed petrol and diesel and crude and reaped a financial windfall. Where they spent the money is a different matter. But today, inflation is the top priority, top issue. But what I hear over the last 2 days, obviously, evidently the RBI and the finance minister don't see don't see eye to eye. The RBI governor, day before yesterday, said, we are keeping our powder dry, we will control inflation, and if necessary, interest rates will go up. Same as what Jeremy Powell has said in the US. But the finance minister yesterday has said, interest rate is not the only instrument to control inflation, and I don't agree that interest rate is the main instrument to control inflation. Before you and I agree, let the two of them agree.
No, but it's good that there is some disagreement and confrontation. It shows the RBI has a mind of its own. The finance minister has a mind of its own. It's not like North Bloc is controlling the RBI.
I'm not saying there should not be differences. I've had differences with the RBI governor. But resolve it soon. Find a solution. Is interest rate your main instrument to control inflation, or do you going to attend to the supply side? Or do you have another magic wand? Please tell us. After all, the opposition is illiterate, no? Therefore, please tell us.
So, in a few days from now, India will be hosting the G20 Leaders Summit. The Prime Minister uses, this G20 presidency to say it will be a catalyst for a new global order, where his government has invested a lot of equity and effort in this presidency. And they want it to be a pivotal moment where, in the push that India is making for the African Union to be brought into the G20, the push for India to emerge as a leader of the global south, they're hoping that this presidency can show it's not a routine rotational presidency, but something special, something which marks a new moment in the emergence of a new global order.
The presidency of the G20 comes once in 20 years. There was a presidency in 2003-04 when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister and Yashwant Sinha was the Finance Minister. There will be a presidency in 2043. The hype about 2023 is extraordinary. I mean, I don't grudge them that. What did not occur to Vajpayee, Yashwant Sinha has occurred to Mr. Narendra Modi, and good luck to him. But please note that our place in G20 will be determined by our economic strength, also by our political strength, political stability, democracy, governance, etc., etc. Let's not talk about the second one because I think this is largely about the economics, or we are talking about economics. Among the G20 countries, we have the lowest per capita income. Among the BRICS countries, we have the lowest per capita income. So India is not top dog in the G20. We are down there. I don't blame this government. We are there and we have not moved up rapidly.
We had Borge Brande, the president of the World Economic Forum, here at the Business Today India at 100 summit this morning, and he said that the next 10 years will see the G3 determine the new global order. The United States, China and India. This is the first time he explained the construct of the G3 and that India would be a $10 trillion economy by 2033. No one's really spoken of the G3 ever before this, and if things were quite as bad as you're suggesting, Mr. Chidambaram, then India's on your watch largely been a middle power. The fact that the world is seeing India emerge as a great power, the government will claim it's because of the energy that Prime Minister Modi has brought to the job.
I don't agree with this G3. G3 in terms of per capita, if that happens, I'll be the happiest person. Not G3 in terms of GDP. The GDP is boosted because of our huge population, 1.4 billion. And we will continue to rise in population until we stabilize at about 1.7 billion. We may even become number one or number two. That doesn't give us economic clout or political clout. Economic clout comes out of being leaders in a few industry, being world leaders in a few industry, world leaders in technology, rising per capita income, reduction of poverty, eventually leading to abolition of poverty. That gives us economic status. I don't think economic status is acquired by becoming the third largest GDP, largely because of our population. We are a poor country. Please remember, and I repeated it in the Raipur Congress, I repeat it here. In this country, 50% of the people hold 3% of the nation's wealth and enjoy 13% of the nation's income. Of the 50% of India's population, 23 crore are abjectly poor. All that is known to the world. It can't be hidden behind neon lights and LED lights. All that is known to the world, that there are many, many, many more poor people in this country than any other country. We should address those issues before we acquire to become the G3.
Mr. Chidambaram made a very important observation just now, which is that economic strength is also a derivative of political stability and power. Can it, given the current state of the Congress party and the state of Indian politics, then be argued, Mr. Chidambaram, that the Congress party at this moment isn't in a position to be able to give political stability by itself? If it is just about political stability being a key factor in economic power of a country, then the Congress is too enfeebled to be able to come anywhere close to the 272 mark by itself. And even if there is an opposition government, it will be a hodgepodge government of multiple parties, and it will be very difficult to steer the government, if it were to come to power, with the kind of purpose that's being seen. How do you respond to this?
I wish I could violently disagree with you, but I'm peace-loving, therefore I won't violently disagree.
I can call for a helmet, a bulletproof jacket.
It is a coalition government of Dr. Manmohan Singh, which had 145 members of the Congress party in the first 5 years and 206 in the next 5 years, which delivered the highest growth in this country for any 10-year period. If you will pardon immodesty, I happen to have a small role in that government. Highest economic growth ever in India was delivered between 2004 and 2014. For 3-4 years in running, we topped 9%. Never achieved before. Therefore, don't rubbish coalition governments. All of Europe is coalition governments.
And all of Europe is in, I mean, not all of Europe, but a lot of Europe is in a mess in terms of what the protests that we're seeing.
No, all of Europe is not in a mess. No. Denmark, okay. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, they're all doing very well. You don't hear about them because they don't create trouble.
Okay, interesting. No, but a lot of Europe, because of coalition governments, is also seeing the kind of protests and the kind of internal turmoil. And Europe as a continent is weakened, whereas India's comprehensive national power has indeed gone up by the evaluation of most think tanks, most global consultancies. India is seen now as an emerging great power, and we've never really heard of India being a great power in global conversations before this.
See, you were too young when Jawaharlal Nehru was Prime Minister.
No, sir, I wasn't around.
You're not even born.
I wasn't around.
Jawaharlal Nehru was considered a world statesman when India was very poor. So they had nothing to do with each other. He was a world statesman. India was a peacemaker, peacekeeping forces in Korea, in Cambodia, here in Africa, there, etc. India was trying to play a global role when it had no economic strength at all. Therefore, I don't grudge the Prime Minister acquiring to global leadership positions, etc. I don't grudge that, wish him well. But the point I'm making is, unless we address issues of poverty, unemployment, abject poverty, this is not the kind of poverty you have in the US. There are poor people in the US. I used to joke, poverty in US means you don't have meat on your dinner table. But abject poverty in India is still there, and we must address that. These are the matters which should be addressed, and I think a coalition government can do as well as a single party government. A single party, double engine government has created more trouble in Haryana and Manipur than a coalition government has.
In the time that I have left, I want to talk about Mission 2047, where the government of the day claims that India will be a developed country by 2047, Viksit Desh by 2047. In the way that things are, do you think that's the Indian trajectory of becoming a developed country by 2047?
See, depends on your definition of development. A middle-income country must have about $10,000–12,000 per capita. We are about $2,500 per capita. By 2047, that's another 24 years, 25 years. If we grow at 7.5% or 8%, we could become a middle-income country. But if we grow at the current rate, 5.7%, we will not become a middle-income.
I was speaking to Ruchir Sharma, formerly of Morgan Stanley, in New York recently during the Prime Minister's visit, and the point that he made is this 9–10% that you refer to is growth rate from an era in the past, because at that time there was more proclivity towards open and free trade, which isn't the global norm right now, and therefore this idea that India should grow in double digits or at 9% is simply not rooted in the economic reality of the moment.
You can always find an explanation for a constraint you're facing. Every government faces constraints. Did we not face constraints? Did Mr. Narasimha Rao not face constraints? Every government faces constraints. Your quality of your governance and your abilities to get over those constraints and yet grow at a clipping pace. The key is growth. It's growth which is the tide that lifts all boats. Growth is necessary but not sufficient. But without growth, you cannot aspire to become a middle-income country or an economic power. And my definition of growth is you must grow at least 7.5%, perhaps 8%. Now, the chief economic advisor predicted that we will grow at 6% for the rest of the decade. I wrote a column, a modest man predicts modest growth. But that's not enough. And here you saw the chairman of an economic advisory council 4 or 5 days ago is now saying what we've been saying for the last 8 years. The GST rate should be a single rate. And GST, the current GST is robbing us of our tax revenues. So there are a lot of people in the government camp who seem to be echoing what we have been saying for the last 7, 8 years.
But they got it done. I mean, GST, bringing all the state finance ministers together, trying to get the GST framework going.
That was done. No, I'm sorry. Yashwant Sinha formed the council, and I ran the council for several years before the GST was introduced. This GST is a terrible GST. And let me make a statement. If the government is replaced by another government, there will be GST 2.0. This GST will be scrapped.
Scrapped?
Yes.
What would be your single rate?
Single rate.
What would be that rate?
Well, that will depend upon the economic situation, but there is the report of the former Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramaniam. Please read that report. Single low rate with practically no exemptions is the model of a GST which we recommended. I pleaded with Arun Jaitley, don't bring this bill. Please call all the political parties. Let's have a discussion. And let's agree on a single rate. He says, no, we have decided on multiple rates. And that's the mess. And this GST is actually costing the government revenues which it could earn. And that's not my statement. That is the statement of the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. Either he's on his way out and he's make the statement, or he's going to stay and
You're
influence
just
the
creating
government.
trouble for him, huh? No, but we're running out of time. I have occasion just for one question on the key divergence on economic thinking between the current government and your government, sir, which is on the issue of freebies and doles. You mentioned Arvind Subramaniam, the likes of Raghuram Rajan, even Abhijit Banerjee and so many other top economists, including many worthies from your party, had suggested during the pandemic that more cash should be given. Go for a universal basic income. It is this government's case that because they didn't come under pressure from Nobel laureates and from supposedly high-flying economists, I mean, that's what they say they are, that India has come out stronger. Otherwise, our fiscal situation would have been far worse than it is because the government resisted the temptation at a time when they were flying blind in the pandemic. They resisted the temptation.
This is the counterfactual fear. If we had not done this, we would have been worse. Why? If we had not done these and done other things, we would have been better, is my case. Why do you assume we would have been worse? Why is the counterfactual worse? It could be better. Please remember that this government did not know to get over the constraints it faced. We were better in facing the constraints and overcoming the constraints. As I said, every government faces constraints. It's your ability to get over those constraints. And that is, come back to freebies. This government does not give freebies. Some. The entire PLI is a freebie. Read Dr. Raghuram Rajan's lecture. The entire PLI is a freebie. And what about your IBC? Your IBC is resolving a few hundred cases, and the recovery is 20%. 20% of the liquidation value. What about that 80% which has been given away? The 80% that has been given away is not a freebie. Your cut in tax rate, corporate tax rate, has given away 2,25,000 crore. Is that not a freebie to the corporates?
It's also led to tax buoyancy. It's also led to corporates. And you would have, someone like you would have advocated, I mean, I don't know if you had the sanction to go out and do it, but you'd think that moderate tax rates is actually good.
Moderate tax rates does not mean touching the bottom. Are we priding ourselves, we have the lowest tax rate in the world? Where is that 2,25,000 crore bonanza that was given to the corporates? Has it translated into private investment?
But soon after that was the pandemic as well. So, I mean, it's a question of timing. You had a black swan.
Pandemic is 2 years old, my dear friend. You will keep on talking about the pandemic even after 10 years. You will talk about UPA government even after 9 years. Time moves faster than you do.
Oh, absolutely. So, which is why it was important to have an alternate point of view, because we've had so many worthies from the government present a particular point of view. You've said maybe things would have been better had the government gone for a universal basic income. That's the promise that you will go to voters with in the next general elections, and the voters will decide whether they want...
Universal basic income has not been fleshed out. Universal basic income is a notion that is accepted by many, many economists in the world. It's not such a bad thing. I mean, don't damn it and don't defame it. Universal basic income in a poor country is an accepted principle. Now, when it's fleshed out, in my mind, I have the contours of a universal basic income. It will start with the bottom 15% or 20%. It will not be universal basic income for all the people of this country. It will start with the poorest of the poor. And I've told you, 16% of India's population is abjectly poor. We can start with 16%. What is wrong with that?
Okay.
Morally, it's correct. Ethically, it's correct. Economically, it's correct.
Okay, so that's the pitch the Congress, Mr. Chidambaram, and the India Alliance will go with. There will be a counter.
No, I'm not speaking for the India Alliance.
So you're not.
India Alliance has better minds, better leaders, and they will come up with a manifesto. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying I have fleshed out in my mind what a UBI can be to start with, and I think
what would be the amount of the UBI?
Well, this will all depend upon the year because inflation has eaten
No, right
into-
now.
Right now. We'll have to work out the resource. As I said,
You said you fleshed it out in your mind, now
No,
you're not telling us.
I said contours of the UBI. The data you allow our government's finance minister, whoever he or she may be, sit in that chair for a week and we'll tell you the numbers.
Okay, for that you need to go to the voters, you need to win their trust, and you need to come back. That's how you'll end up once again in the finance ministry.
Of course. You see, every politician, every political party must aspire to be in government. It's like cricket. Those who are out want to get those who are in out. Those who are in don't want those who are out to come in. And it's like cricket. And that's the rule of a democratic opposition. We must aspire to come to power. We make no bones about it. The Congress party does aspire to come to power
Mr. Chidambaram's view is very clearly different from those who think power is poison. But I don't want to go down that road because that will be a whole different debate. Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram, for coming here and presenting an alternate point of view of India at 100. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.